Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I've done this video a couple times before, but I didn't do it last year, so this is just going to be like a nice way to reflect a little bit on how my reading's been going in 2023. I had to break out my light for this because it's too dark to just use the window, so I'm just going to try and be quick so that my light doesn't like fall over. Alright, starting off nice and easy, how is your reading going this year? And I have to say, I'm very happy with how my reading is going. I feel like in terms of quality, I'm having such a better reading year than I did last year. Last year was like extremely forgettable, extremely average. I think I only had one or two new 5-star reads. This year I'm reading, I didn't read anything in April or March or April, so like that kind of sucks, but of the times when I am reading, I'm reading a book that I love at least every couple weeks. So I'm feeling really happy with like the quality of my books this year. Next is the best book you've read so far in 2023. And honestly, I need to buy a physical copy of this because I'm going to be holding this up in like so many recommendation and end of year wrap up videos, but it's A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. I read this back to back. I read it twice. I'm obsessed. I read the sequel recently and I didn't love it as much, but this first book is perfection. It's the first book in the Last Binding trilogy. It is a historical fantasy romance where it is truly half fantasy, half romance. I feel like fantasy romances can often go, or romantic fantasies can go a couple different ways, but typically it's either a true genre romance with kind of like the whispers, the sprinkle of a fantasy element plot, just kind of for world building, or it is a fantasy or science fiction or SFF book that has a significant romantic subplot that is closed door, or it is secondary to the plot. This is like a perfect in the middle. I'm obsessed. For the next question, it is the best sequel I've read so far in 2023, and that is going to be The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman. I haven't mentioned this in a while. It was like the second or third book I read this year, but it's the third book in the Thursday Murder Club series, and I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed with the first book. The second book I really liked but didn't love as much, and this third book was just such a delight. I love this series so much. I can't wait for the fourth one later this year, even though I could not remember the name if my life depended on it. But this book is so fun. It's about a group of residents of a retirement community who solve murders, and it's just ridiculous and delightful and so funny, and absolutely one of my favorite sequels that I've read this year, not counting rereads. Speaking of rereads, the next question is favorite reread so far this year. So I would say one of them is The Sum of All Kisses, but I've reread this so many times. I think I've read this book 6 times total now, which is like insane. But I actually just last night finished my reread of Harrow the Night. So this is my very first time rereading this. It was delightful. I loved this book more the second time than I did the first time, which is like, it's so good. So this is so much my favorite reread of this year. The first time I read Harrow the Ninth, I listened to the audiobook, which highly recommend the audiobooks. I love the narrator. However, in terms of like absolute comprehension of everything happening in this book, I would have to say that reading it physically is better. When you listen to the audiobook, it's much more likely that you're going to miss little details, because I can say I missed a lot of, not just little details, just like major things the first time I read this. So reading this again, I feel like I learned so much more about the characters and the plot and the world building, and I cannot wait to read the third one. But favorite reread of the year is definitely Harrow the Ninth. Up next is the genre you've been loving or reading the most. I think, like every year, the genre I've been reading the most is romance. Like, that's probably never gonna change, but I feel like I've really been on a horror kick like this whole year. I feel like I've just been really drawn to it, so I'm gonna go with like gothic horror and just horror in general. I've just been vibing with it lately. It's probably my second most read genre this year, which is very unusual. Usually it's romance and then fantasy and then mystery, or something, but this year it's romance and then horror and then fantasy. So I don't know. Up next is new releases you haven't read but want to, and that is going to be She is a Haunting by Tran. So gorgeous. And then also In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. I actually had an arc of this and I didn't read it. So I really want to get to this. This is another one of his kind of more whimsical fantasy situations, except this one I believe is about automatons and puppets and free will and family. So very excited about this. And this is a haunted house book. I love haunted houses and I love horror and I love the end papers on this. Like, absolutely gorgeous. Next is my most anticipated releases for the second half of 2023, and I have two. So before this, I read any books this year, the one that I was looking forward to the most was Heavenly Tyrant by Xiran Zhao. This is the second book in the Iron Widow duology. I read the first one a couple years ago and loved it. It's like this fun, grandiose mecha sci-fi, like aliens fighting robots, but kind of inspired by ancient Chinese history and the first female emperor. And so I was very into it. I can't wait for the sequel. I've been waiting a couple years, so it's going to be so good. But as of the books that I've read this year, I would say that another one of my most anticipated reads is absolutely a power Unbound by Freya Marske. This is the third book in the Last Binding trilogy, and I've heard such good things, like in ARC reviews. So I'm so excited. I'm like foaming at the mouth for this book. The next question is about my biggest disappointments of the year, and I do have a couple. I'm gonna say first, I was pretty disappointed with Satisfaction Guaranteed. It's getting a little blown out. I don't know. Yeah, you can see a little better over there. But I was hoping so much that I would really love this because I, a couple years ago, asked for the Ripped Bodice bookstore's book box as like a Hanukkah gift. So my mom actually got me 6 months of the Read Romance Repeat book, or Romance Read Repeat book box. And I've read a few, I think I've only read like 1 or 2 books from those 6 months so far, but this was one of them. And I was really hopeful that I would like it because it was one of the only sapphic books. And I ended up hating this, so that was super disappointing. And then another one that I was really disappointed in is Primal Animals by Julia Lynn Rubin. Because it has such a fucking cool cover and a fun camp premise, and I was just very much let down by the quality of the pacing and the plotting and the characterization and the everything. On a more positive note, my biggest surprise of the year is going to be Sweet Vengeance by Viano Oniomoh. I fucking loved this book. It's one of the other ones where I finished it and then immediately started reading it over. And I'm going to say this is the biggest surprise because I had heard nothing about it. I read this book because I saw the author tweet about it and I was like, oh, that sounds like a really cool premise. It's about a woman summoning a demon to help her kill the man who assaulted her, and then they fall in love, like her and the demon. And I love that. Like, we love bloodthirsty women and the demons who adore them, obviously. But I had heard nothing about this. I was just like, oh, it's a cool cover, it sounds like a cool premise. And then I read it and it fucking slapped. It was so good. So this was absolutely my biggest surprise because I had nothing to base it on. So like I had no expectations, and then it still blew my expectations out of the water. Like, it was so insanely good. Up next is, do you have a new favorite author? Either an author who is new to you or one you've read before that has become a favorite. And this is like kind of both because I read 2 books from this author this year, and that is Kingfisher. This was my very first book of the year, and I read this 2 months ago, and I really, really loved both of them. Neither of these were 5-star reads. They were both in the 4.5. But to me, a favorite author is not someone who has, like, every single book is 5 stars. To me, a favorite author is an author who I can depend on to explore themes and tropes that I find interesting in a writing style that I like, where if I read like 10 books of theirs, 9 out of 10 are going to be 3.5 to 4.5 stars. Like, I don't need every single book to be 5 stars, but I need to have a good time reading all of them. And so that kind of consistency is more what I'm looking for in a favorite author. And I do believe that I found it in T. Kingfisher, short little horror novels. I'm so excited to explore more of this author's like insanely large backlist. So I'm very happy to have discovered T. Kingfisher this year. I was pretty sure I would like her books, but I'm very happy that I was right. Up next is new favorite character. I think on other versions of this list, it's like, do you have a new book crush? And I'm gonna say, usually I say no because I don't know. But this time, I'm gonna have to say Jane from One Last Stop for book crush more than new favorite character. I think if I was gonna say new favorite character, I would have to go with Harrow the Ninth from Harrow the Ninth, because I knew I liked her character from the first time I read the first 2 books in the series, Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth, but reading this again and actually paying close attention, I fell in love with her character in a way that I had often see other people love her character, and I was a little like, I don't get it. I get it now. But in terms of book crush, Jane from One Last Stop is so kind and charming and nice and hot and interesting, and I'm just like, call me, you know what I mean? It's absolutely Jane from One Last Stop. And this actually feeds really nicely into the next question, which is books that made you cry, because this book made me fucking sob. I love, and I love queer history, and I love crazy, unrealistic odds of people being together and them overcoming the odds to, you know, make it work. And I loved the end of this book. I was sobbing the first time I finished it, and then I spent the next 2 days re-listening to the last couple chapters and crying again. So I would say this is probably the book that's made me cry the most this year. If there's any other times that I cried reading books, it was not to that extent. It was either like one tear or just like tearing up, not like full sobbing. This was full sobs. Next is a book that made you happy, and that is going to be, I own a physical copy, but my friend borrowed it, but that is going to be Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This is truly just like so cheerful and delightful. And it has dark moments, but I would say the feeling that I felt while reading this book overwhelmingly was just like pure delight. It felt like I had emotionally become cotton candy, and that I think that's what happy is, right? So I loved this book. I thought it was so good. The next question is, what do you need to read before the end of the year? And well, the answer is always everything. I want to read everything before the end of the year. Here are a few that I thought I could mention. First, I want to really read the 2 newer Ali Hazelwood books. This is, I guess, also a new release I want to read, but I never read Love on the Brain that came out last year, and I've heard really good things about both of them, and I'm going on vacation this next week, so it makes sense that I should just bring one of these, right? For poolside reading, I think that would make sense. Love theoretically is kind of big. Ooh, okay. Speaking of big, I want to read Priory of the Orange Tree this year. I know I've been talking about this for actual years because I bought this in Texas in 2020. So I've owned this book for at least 3 years. But I want to read it. My brother read this year, and he read the prequel, like right after. And he said they were so good and that I would like them. And he read Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth because I bullied him into it. So the least I can do is read the stuff that he tells me to read, you know? So I want to read this year. I'm determined. And then 2 more that I think would just be fun to mention that I want to read this year. First, Nona the Ninth. I am going to read this month. I might even start it tonight while I like eat dinner because I can't not. I want to read this so bad. And then also We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. I just think this would be fun. It is so pink, it's like not even showing up on camera. This is about a field hockey team who I think makes a deal with Spirit to win their field hockey season. And I just like to read, and I want to read everything. So, do I have anything? Oh! There are more questions. I thought that was the end, but there are 2 more. Next is favorite video that you've put up so far this year. I don't remember what I have made. One second. Okay, a couple that I was honestly pretty happy with. I really liked my Hellbent reading. I should have brought out Hellbent. That was a really good sequel too. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, also a really good sequel that I read this year. I've had a really good year of books so far, guys, like, genuinely. But I was really happy with my Hellbent vlog. I thought that was really fun, even though, like, the timeline that I had envisioned for myself did not really pan out. And then another vlog that I thought was really fun was the one from last month where I went and read in the park. That was really fun to film, like, to make, because I like going to Rittenhouse to read. But I don't know, I've just been having fun with all my vlogs because I think I've put a little bit less pressure on myself. I've put zero pressure on myself to create themed TBR vlogs. That was something that I was so excited about at the beginning of this year. I came up with so many ideas, and I think the honest, genuine truth is that I'm never going to be someone who can successfully execute that type of vlog because I don't have the attention span to plan something out that long term, or it's like the second I decide I'm gonna read something, I don't want to. So, and then lastly, favorite book community members. As always, I think they say this every year, Books Like Whoa, Mara from Books Like Whoa, she's just my fave. I love her. I think she's so intelligent. I love the books that she reads. I love the way she talks about books. But I'm also going to say someone newer, not new to BookTube, but newer to me is Jen Campbell. She is a booktuber and an author from the UK. And she and I, our tastes, like, do not overlap at all. She mostly reads literary fiction and translated literary fiction, and I have to say the way that she talks about books and analyzes them and understands like the depth and the references and the like intertextual connections between different books and how certain themes are in conversation with other authors, the way that she speaks about the books she reads makes me want to get better at reading books. As I read, it's not natural for me to be thinking critically, even though I do after the fact. And the way that she speaks about the books that she reads, it just makes me love reading even more. Like, I love people who love to read, and the way, I could not speak more highly about her. I love her videos, and I will link some of my favorites in the description box. So, I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed. I have so many books on my lap right now that I need to put away, which is great. But I will see you guys next week. Let me know how your reading has been going and if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!